Hyakkimaru was cursed by the demons and was born without a body, which made his father leave him in the wild to die. He manages to survive because of his unwavering strength and the will to live, becoming the strongest demon hunter around who fights with prosthetic limbs. His only goal is to defeat all of the demons and to regain his entire body, which was stolen from him. In ancient Japan, there lived a lord named Dago who was obsessed with power and wanted to control the entire kingdom. The gods, however, were not on his side as his region kept dealing with epidemics and famine, destroying their economy completely. One day, he decides to take matters in his own hands and goes over to the Temple of the Demons, where the statues of these ancient monsters are erected. He finds a priest there who tries to stop him, but he immediately kills the old man, slashing him twice on the back and then turns towards the demons. He made a deal with them, offering them anything they wanted from him in return for making him the most powerful and rich man of the region. The demons seem to respond as a wind blows the candles out before there is lightning in the room, followed by a loud thunder, making a mark on Dago's forehead. He returns back to his home where after some time his wife goes into labor and a baby boy is born, but as soon as the baby cries, there is lightning inside of the room again, beheading the statue of Buddha as Dago runs inside while the midwives run away screaming in horror. He peers inside to see his wife with a baby wrapped in cloth in her arms, who she named Hyakkimaru. One of the older women seems to be shocked as well as Dago takes the boy from his wife's arms, but as soon as he undoes the cloth, he is appalled to see a boy with no skin, no limbs, and no organs, barely breathing in his arms while covered in blood. The wife looks up at Dago and begs him to keep the boy and raise him as his own, but Dago simply laughs, claiming that the demons took what they wanted, and now they will make him the most powerful man in the kingdom. He looks at his wife and tells her that they will produce another heir and gives the boy to the older woman so she can leave him in the water to die. His wife cries and begs him to let him live, but Dago holds her down as the woman takes the kid away. She goes near a riverbank and tries to drown the kid, but watching him breathe makes her think twice about her actions, so she puts him on a boat and lets him go, telling him that only luck can protect him now. Immediately after, a giant monster appears behind her and tears her to shreds, killing her immediately. A wandering musician holding a musical instrument seems to notice that something is awry, and even though he is blind, he senses the monster near him and takes out his sword before killing the monster in a single slash. The boy, however, kept sailing in an idle boat and ends up being found by a man named Jukai, who used to be a soldier whose job was to torture enemies, but one day he ended up turning all of this down and decided to atone for his sins by making prosthetic limbs for anyone who lost them for free and became a doctor. He picks Hyakkimaru up, who he is shocked to see is still breathing and sucking on his thumb. He takes him in his house and raises him as his own, designing brand new prosthetics for him, as he has never seen a boy who was born with basically no body parts. Some years pass, and Hyakkimaru is a young boy who spends his time running around and playing amongst the trees. Jukai lets him do whatever he wants, as he seems to be an extraordinarily curious child who is very strong and intuitive. He learns how to distinguish between food as he grabs a crab, but his father takes him to take it back to the house where they cook and eat. One day, while Jukai was cutting some firewood, Hyakkimaru ends up going inside of the forest and is suddenly attacked by a giant wolf-like demon with incredibly long claws. The wolf wrestles him to the ground while Hyakkimaru holds his arms to protect himself. The wolf tries to bite him, but he dodges and buys enough time that Jukai finds him and throws an axe at the wolf, injuring him and scaring him off. Jukai is in shock to see an actual demon, as he has only heard tales about them. He takes Hyakkimaru back and patches him up, after which he lays down. But suddenly, Hyakkimaru wakes up and starts looking at the ceiling. Jukai tries to check what's wrong, only to realize that a demon was hiding in the ceiling, trying to kill Hyakkimaru, who immediately scurries off after being seen. Jukai realizes that these demons are after Hyakkimaru because of some curse, and he is not going to let the young boy die, so the next day, he hands him a wooden sword and starts teaching him how to fight, as he won't always be around to protect him. At first, he didn't really know how to use the weapon, but he keeps training, and several seasons pass by as he sticks to the regimen and keeps becoming better and better. Several years pass by, and now he is a young man who has gotten extremely skilled with a sword and is easily able to kill demons just by using a wooden sword without any edge. Every single day, he goes into the forest and ends up meeting some new demon, which he kills and comes back all bloodied up and wounded, but he cannot feel pain in his body, so he doesn't realize that he is wounded or bleeding. This makes him extremely fearless and makes him not think about repercussions, as he jumps into a fight not considering that he could get hurt. Jukai patches him that night and thinks whether he should stop him from killing any more demons, as he doesn't want him to get hurt. But the next day, Hyakkimaru ends up getting attacked once more by a demon, and while running away, the demon uses its chameleonic tongue to tie Hyakkimaru's leg and pulls him towards itself. In retaliation, Hyakkimaru stabs the demon in the face with his wooden sword, killing it immediately. Chukai runs up to him to check whether he is okay, when suddenly Hyakkimaru falls down on the ground. His body starts shaking as one of his prosthetic legs come out. In the place of the prosthetic leg, a new actual leg made up of bone and flesh starts forming, shocking Chukai to the core as he has no idea how something like this could happen. Chukai realizes that someone must have made a pact with the demons, sacrificing the poor kid's body, and as he kills down the demons, he is starting to gain those parts back. This makes him realize that Hyakkimaru wants his body back and won't stop killing the demons until he gets what he wants, so he decides to attach him with an actual sword and with a heavy heart says his farewell before hugging him for one last time before Hyakkimaru begins his dangerous journey of killing the demons. Hyakkimaru moves from city to city, searching for monsters, and one such day while standing on a bridge, he senses a monster arriving from the river and also notices a bunch of men beating the crap out of a small boy who seems to have stolen something from them. They beat the boy up, but the boy tries to fight back and throws rocks at them twice before getting beaten up even more, and finally the fat man has had enough and he decides to kill the poor kid, forcing his head underwater. They suddenly notice Hyakkimaru standing and watching a seemingly normal garbage pile flowing up the river when suddenly the pile converts into a monster that looks like Muck from Pokemon. The monster immediately gobbles up the fatty, eating him alive before grabbing both of the cronies as well, killing them immediately. The monster grabs the young boy as well and was about to eat him when Hyakkimaru removes his prosthetic hand to reveal a sword blade inside and cuts down the monster, saving the boy before getting attacked by it. He quickly climbs up the bridge and removes his other arm as well, revealing another blade, and starts dodging the monster as it attacks him ruthlessly, even climbing up the bridge. The bridge collapses under the weight of the demon, and the falling timber kills the monster. Hyakkimaru gets out of the water, where the boy runs up to him with his prosthetic arms and introduces himself as Dororo, before helping him reattach his arms. Dororo tries talking to him, but realizes that Hyakkimaru can neither see nor speak, and is basically like Helen Keller, as all of his body parts seem to be prosthetic, but suddenly he starts trembling violently as his mask falls off on his face and Dororo sees skinless muscles beneath that mask that rapidly gets covered by skin as he gets his face back from the demons who his father made the deal with. Hyakkimaru starts walking again on his way, while Dororo, still shocked at what he saw, starts following him, asking him questions and trying to talk to him, but all he receives in exchange is silence. Hyakkimaru completely ignores him and keeps walking before turning towards a bush and starts eating a bunch of berries from the bush. Dororo accompanies him while still asking him all kinds of questions. Hyakkimaru then moves over to the river and after removing his arms, starts making shish kebabs with the fishes and is going to eat them raw before Dororo stops him and tells him to cook it first. Dororo quickly gets down to work and shows Hyakkimaru why he is known as the Japanese Bear Grylls, as he quickly lights a friction fire which will put survival YouTubers to shame. With that out of the way, he skewers the fish on a stick and starts cooking it low and slow on the flame, while Hyakkimaru waits eagerly. As soon as the fish is done, he takes it out and hands one over to Hyakkimaru, who tastes it first before starting to gulp them down hungrily. They both eat, and Dororo sleeps nearby afterwards, waking up once after having a bad dream and goes over to Hyakkimaru before sleeping again. The next morning, while Hyakkimaru was busy catching fishes, Dororo runs up to him and claims that they can earn good money as apparently there is a demon in a nearby village and the villagers are willing to pay whoever gets rid of it. He guides Hyakkimaru to the village where they meet up with one of the elders who tells them that they do want someone to get rid of the demon and invites them over to rest at night in their shed. Dororo seems to be very happy sleeping with a roof on top of his hand and a full belly, but while trying to talk to Hyakkimaru, suddenly a wind blows and extinguishes a candle before a ringing sound is heard as a demonic-looking being enters their barn and walks up to Dororo. He is scared out of his mind and runs up to Hyakkimaru, telling him to kill the monster, but Hyakkimaru stays put and doesn't even move a muscle. Dororo tries to remove his arms to reveal the blade, but Hyakkimaru still stays silent and calmly looks straight ahead, while Dororo is regretting coming alongside him. Thankfully, however, the demon simply turns back around and while ringing his bell, moves out of the barn. Dororo looks at Hyakkimaru and shouts at him for not doing anything, claiming that he is useless because he can't even see when a demon arrives. Listening to this commotion, a bunch of villagers enter the barn, and they ask them what's up. Dororo lies to them that they met the monster, but he ran away as soon as he saw Hyakkimaru, and they have decided to kill it tomorrow night. With that, the villagers leave and both him and Hyakkimaru go back to sleep. The next morning, they are woken up by the village elder, who tells them that the village chief wants to meet with them, and she can't come here herself because she is sick. Hyakkimaru and Dororo both accompany the guy into a beautiful-looking giant mansion. When the guy pushes them inside and closes the door, they enter a dark room when it is suddenly lighted up by a beautiful-looking woman laying on a bed. She introduces herself as the chief and greets them warmly before telling them how glad she is to have them in her house. Hyakkimaru, however, immediately draws his sword and tries to run up to the woman, only to be stopped by Dororo, who tells him that the woman is not a monster and that he is acting like a total buffoon. Hearing the commotion, a bunch of villagers enter the room and, watching Hyakkimaru with a blade in his hand, immediately seize him and Dororo before taking them out and throwing them into a cell. Dororo shouts at him for pulling out his blade on a poor sickly woman and tells him that he is leaving as soon as they get out of here. Suddenly, he notices that the cell has another prisoner, who turns out to be the same wandering priest who killed the monster when Hyakkimaru was left in the river. He is also blind, but seems to sense that he has seen Hyakkimaru before. Dororo asks him why he is here, and the priest replies that he was also called here to get rid of a demon, but ended up getting jailed just like them. He tells the priest about what Hyakkimaru did, but the priest replies that after fighting demons without having the eyes to see them, people like him and Hyakkimaru have developed a keen sense, which basically lets them see the soul inside of a person's body. He reveals that he can see Dororo as a white matter, meaning that his soul is clean and pure. Suddenly, however, the candles blow out in their room, and both the priest and Hyakkimaru get on alert mode as they sense something. A demonic arm is seen coming out of a well, and Hyakkimaru immediately jumps and slices it away before following the trail. The priest grabs Dororo and takes him alongside, claiming that there must be a way out through this, and they end up coming out inside of the lady's mansion. Hyakki doesn't wait even a second and kicks down her door, where she is still sitting where she is, but this time looks much more intimidating. She tries to talk to them normally, asking them why they are here, but the priest tells Dororo that her soul is murky red, which means that she is not even a human anymore. As soon as the woman realizes that her facade is up, she transforms into a demon, while Hyakkimaru unsheathes his swords, ready for a fight. She lets out a roar, blowing debris all over, and smacks Hyakkimaru down with her tail when he tries to attack her. She attacks him again, but he dodges before launching himself at her while she tries to stab him with her tentacles. However, Hyakkimaru is able to sustain it because all of them go through his prosthetic body parts, leaving him unscathed. Hyakkimaru pushes through and slashes both of her eyes, making her cry out in pain as she backs off, while the village elder tries to catch Hyakkimaru in a net, yelling at the monster to run away. The monster immediately takes off into the woods, while Hyakkimaru cuts through the net and gives chase. Dororo screams at the man for letting the monster run away, and it turns out that the villager used to lure the travelers into their village, claiming to give them a taste of their hospitality, but instead would end up feeding them to the monster so that it leaves the villagers alone. Hyakkimaru chases the monster while cutting through the bamboo forest as it stops and starts throwing sharp bamboo stakes at him. One of the bamboo stakes pin him down, but suddenly the monster with the bell that appeared the night before ends up distracting the demon, giving Hyakkimaru the opportunity to escape as he slashes the face of the demon, revealing the woman once again, who starts transforming into her real face of a demon, claiming that the other demons will kill Hyakkimaru and he will never be able to get his entire body back. Hyakkimaru then stabs the demon in the head, killing it once and for all, while the village elder drops to the ground, sad that the demon is dead. They hear the bell again as the villager covers his ears, and they all go over to the spot where the other monster is standing, and he disappears, showing Dororo the place where a bunch of money is buried. This confuses him, but the priest deduces that the monster with he bell must be one of the travelers that got killed by the demon. The village elder replied that their village used to be very poor, and on top of that, one day this demon entered the village and ended up killing one of the travelers passing through. The villagers were horrified at first, but they found out that the traveler was carrying a bunch of money and ended up stealing all of it. This made them realize this business strategy, and they started housing the demon, making a pact with it so that it doesn't attack any of the villagers, as they will provide the demon with humans, and in return they will steal all of the money on them. Dororo apologizes to Hyakkimaru for calling him Helen Keller and seems to be very down, but Hyakkimaru stops him and writes down his name in the sand so that he can learn it as well. Suddenly, however, he starts feeling excruciating pain as he grabs his face and starts screaming, making both Dororo and the priest worried. It turns out that after killing that demon, Hyakkimaru gets his sense of pain restored, as he can now feel things when he touches them and can also feel pain now. This all seems a bit too overwhelming to him, as all of this is a new sensation, so he simply lays down on the ground while the priest and Dororo talk by the fire. Suddenly, however, Hyakkimaru gets up and walks up to the flame and tries to step on it, only to get burnt as now he can feel pain. He falls back but decides to do it again as he doesn't like this sensation and wants it to disappear and go back to the way it was before when he couldn't feel anything. He was about to get burned once again, but Dororo pushes him off the fire and tells him to shut up and sleep. The next day, the priest ends up leaving them to go his own way, while Dororo and Hyakkimaru travel to another small village where it starts raining, which fascinates Hyakkimaru as he stands in the rain for hours, because this is the first time he is feeling the rain on his skin. Dororo sits near a shrine waiting for him to have enough of the rain so they can start moving when suddenly, a young woman calls Hyakkimaru out asking if he was okay. Dororo turns around to see a beautiful young woman wearing an orange dress. He tells her that Hyakkimaru can't hear anything, and it is a waste to call him, but she still keeps calling him thinking Dororo was joking with her. However, after realizing that Hyakkimaru is Helen Keller, she turns towards Dororo, who asks her what she was praying about, and she replies that she was praying for her brother's safe return as 5 years ago he went to war, and she has no idea where he went after the war was over. Dororo looks at her and asks her whether she thinks he is dead, but she shakes her head, saying that he was an excellent fighter and couldn't die so easily. Their talk is interrupted, however, when an old man comes running up on the way but falls down and bleeds to death while asking for help. Both the girl and Dororo rush up to the old man, just to find him dead, while Hyakkimaru starts running towards the forest. Dororo starts following him and catches him when he stops suddenly, as they see a bunch of men and women dead on the ground, which is covered in blood everywhere. Dororo senses something is off, so he quickly unsheaths his sword when suddenly, he is attacked by a white-haired man from behind, wielding a beautiful sword. Hyakkimaru is able to block the attack and pushes him off as they both fall back. Dororo asks the man whether he is responsible for the murder of these people, and he simply replies that his sword was thirsty and wanted blood, and he just did what the sword wanted to do. He explains that this is a cursed sword who craves human blood, and as soon as someone grabs it, they get under its control and can't stop killing people to satiate the sword's desire. Dororo realizes that this guy is a total nutcase as he tells them that his sword is still thirsty, while Dororo sees that the man wielding the sword seems to be innocent, as his soul is still clean, whereas the sword is in murky red color. The man moves towards Hyakkimaru at an incredible speed, attacking him, while he blocks the first attack and backs off. The man, however, pursues him, and Hyakkimaru is forced to dodge out of the way as the man keeps pushing him into a duel, where their swords clash multiple times before the man stops, telling Hyakkimaru that they both seem to be equally matched in skill. The man then tries to land a quick blow, which Hyakkimaru is able to dodge. However, the man slashes him again in quick succession, barely scratching his cheek, but drawing blood. Hyakkimaru is forced back to the very edge of the cliff, where the man believes that his victory is imminent and tries to stab Hyakkimaru, but he is able to block the attack with his remaining prosthetic leg. The sword gets stuck in the leg and he throws it away, disarming the man before trying to slash his neck off. The man, however, backs off and ends up falling off the cliff, getting hurt badly at the bottom. Dororo runs up to Hyakkimaru and hands him his prosthetic hand while looking for his leg. He spots the leg in a distance with the sword still embedded in it, so he tries it off, but as soon as he touches the sword, it takes control over his body and he is unable to let go. By the time Hyakkimaru arrives to check on him, he has already gotten away after being overwhelmed by the power of the cursed sword. Sun has finally set, and Dororo is still roaming around with the sword in his hand. He seems to be tired by walking all day, but the sword isn't letting him go, no matter how hard he tries. He ends up running into two villagers out for a nightly stroll as they approach to tell him that this area can be dangerous for a kid at night alone, but as soon as they come near him, he ends up slashing at them and barely misses them, cutting one of their clothes open as they run off to the village. Hyakkimaru watches from afar as he notices Dororo walking towards the village as well and goes after to stop him. He finally arrives at the village and finds Dororo walking towards the houses when he confronts him. Dororo seems to be happy after seeing him, but gets concerned once Hyakkimaru draws his sword, ready for a battle. Hyakkimaru swings at Dororo, who dodges twice before running past him trying to get away, but is immediately caught by Hyakkimaru, who tries to slash at him once again, while he dodges by jumping in the air and falls to the ground. Hyakkimaru attacks Dororo, while he tries to defend himself with the sword and blocks his attacks twice before closing his eyes as Hyakkimaru brings down his sword on him once again. Thankfully, however, Hyakkimaru was only aiming for the cursed sword and he disarms Dororo, breaking the sword's control from over him as he stumbles and falls down from exhaustion. Hyakkimaru, however, doesn't get a break as the silver-haired man approaches and grabs the sword once again, happy at the fact that he is reunited with the sword. He tells Hyakkimaru that he used to be a noble samurai, But once his lord told him to execute a bunch of innocent people from the enemy territory, and when he wasn't able to do that, the lord gave him a new sword and told him to use that to execute one of the villagers, otherwise he will kill his entire family. Not having a choice, he went over to the villager, took out his sword, and brought it on the neck of the innocent man, only to realize that the blade was rusty and blunt. The lord starts laughing as the innocent man suffers and tells the guy that the sword was locked up in his attic and is supposed to be a supernatural sword, which gets sharper every time it drinks blood, but thinks that's a fairy tale. Something, however, changes inside of the man as he starts violently chopping of the innocent man's head, and surprisingly enough, the sword starts getting sharper. The lord laughs and tells him to kill all the rest of the innocent villagers, but by now the guy is totally under the sword's control and proceeds to kill every single one of the villagers before turning towards his lord, claiming that the sword was still thirsty for blood and killed them as well. Ever since that day, he has been roaming around from village to village, killing anyone who comes in his way on his never-ending quest to quench the thirst of the sword. That said, he immediately attacks Hyakkimaru, who blocked his blows as the silver-haired man keeps pushing him back with his never-ending onslaught of sword strikes. Their swords clash once again and Hyakkimaru dodges his next blow before they come back to back. The silver-haired man turns around and tries to end Hyakkimaru in one fell swoop, but Hyakkimaru again uses his prosthetic arm to block the sword and unsheathes his second sword, slashing the man and breaking his sword as he lies down on the wet ground, bleeding to death. Suddenly, the same young woman that they met at the shrine emerges from the nearby house and goes running up to the dying man's body and starts crying. It turns out that he was the brother that she was praying for who went to war and never returned. Dororo looks at her sympathetically and returns Hyakkimaru's arms to him, when suddenly he grabs his head and starts experiencing the pain once again before his ears fall off of his head, and he can hear everything for the first time in his life. Dororo and Hyakkimaru leave the village and make a campfire near a stream for the night. Hyakkimaru is way too overwhelmed by the new sense of sound and can't seem to focus or understand what's happening around him as he keeps his hands over his ears to try and prevent any sound hurting his ears. Dororo tells him that he should get used to it quickly, but feels bad for him. So he ends up covering his ears with a spare piece of cloth so that the sounds feel more muted, and it seems to work, as he looks more comfortable than before. While Dororo is talking, however, Hyakkimaru senses a monster coming near him and dodges just in time as a giant bird demon whizzes past them. He takes out his swords as the demon returns back to try and attack, but Hyakkimaru dodges and tries to attack but misses. The bird attacks again and this time hits Hyakkimaru, knocking him down. He gets up but is getting distracted by all the sound coming from near him and gets knocked down once again as the bird hits him. Dororo realizes that he will have to help the next time the bird comes. He tells Hyakkimaru the direction from which it is attacking, and he is able to slash the bird multiple times before it grabs him in its talons and tries to fly off. He slashes it again and again, but gets hurt badly in the process. The bird drops him to the ground and flies away, only to return back for another attack, while Hyakkimaru is down on the ground injured. Thankfully, however, the priest appears out of their ass and slices down the bird in a very fantastic fashion, killing it immediately. Hyakkimaru seems to be in shock as he sits there unmoving, as all of these new sensations are becoming too much for him. They lay him down on a cloth and the priest bandages his wounds a little bit, while Hyakkimaru again covers his ears, trying to block out the sound. Dororo tells the priest that his hearing has returned but now it has made him weak, to which the priest replies that he is just not used to it yet, and tries to force Hyakkimaru's hand away but fails to do so. They sleep on the ground that night, but the next morning, Hyakkimaru is woken up by a beautiful voice of a girl singing a song. He follows the sound to a stream where he spots a girl washing her face. He drops down and walks inside of the stream trying to touch her like my creep uncle, but stumbles as his body is still injured. The girl holds him and asks him whether he is okay, but obviously he can't speak so he doesn't reply. Thankfully, however, Dororo runs up behind him and explains his condition to the girl, who introduces herself as Mio and happily invites him to her place so that she can patch him up as she has some medicine. They walk into a seemingly destroyed temple where she makes them sit down as Hyakkimaru lays on the floor from fever, while Dororo puts wet rags on his head. She comes in and tells them that she lives here with a bunch of orphan children who lost everything because of the war and now have no one to look after them. They ended up banding together, and she is the oldest of the group, so she takes care of everyone. She calls on the rest of the group who are hiding outside, and they all come inside. One of the guys who seems to be the oldest of the kids walks in with a broom and tells everyone to leave so that Mayo can have some sleep before working. He explains that Mayo works for one of the Lord's military, as a war is brewing again. The forces are stationed nearby, so she works for them at night, serving the men that are off to war. She gets up and leaves the room with a smile, while the boy tells her to eat something before she sleeps. He also gets Dororo and the priest some potato gruel to eat, and then goes near the back to clean up the dishes. Dororo walks up to him and asks him whether he could help, but the boy declines, telling him that he is a guest. Dororo, however, insists, and he starts showing off his cleaning skills as the sun starts setting. Mio emerges from her room and tells everyone that she's going off to work, so they should take care of each other. She walks in Hyakkimaru's room and checks his fever to make sure he is okay, which wakes him up before moving out of the house. She starts humming the song while Hyakkimaru looks longingly as she walks away into the woods. The priest also decides to go out for a stroll, telling Dororo that he will try to find a safe way for them to move so that they don't get caught in the war. The next morning, Hyakkimaru wakes up early and sits on the steps of the temple waiting for her to come back and looks happy as she arrives and spots him. He looks at her, while Dororo tells her that he can see the color of a person's soul and can easily find out where the demons are staying. Hyakkimaru, however, doesn't really care about anything else and points at her mouth while moving his mouth. She doesn't understand what he's trying to say, but he keeps repeating that gesture, making Dororo believe that he wants her to sing her song. She gets kinda embarrassed, but then starts singing the song while Hyakkimaru listens to it happily as he doesn't find her voice painful. By the time they go inside, even the priest comes back and they all sit down in one of the rooms, where the priest informs them that he found a vacant plot in the woods at a very safe location as the army won't be able to reach it. The ground is also fertile, so they can even grow food if they want to. Mio seems to be very happy about it and tells the priest that she will try to move into the plot as soon as possible, but the priest replies that it is already occupied by a demon who lives in the sand crater in front of the house. Hearing this, Hyakkimaru immediately gets up and starts walking outside in the direction of the house. The priest tries to stop him, telling him that he hasn't healed from the wounds received in the previous battle yet, but he seems to be adamant and keeps walking. The priest lets out a deep sigh and tells Dororo to stay here as he will go after Hyakkimaru and try to defeat the demon. By the time they reach the house, night has fallen as the priest shows Hyakkimaru where the demon is. Hyakkimaru immediately takes out his sword, but grimaces as the wounds reopen and he starts feeling the pain again. The priest tells him that they should go back and wait for him to heal, but Hyakkimaru refuses. Suddenly, the demon emerges from the crater and starts swirling around, making a whirlpool out of the sand, bringing them in. Hyakkimaru immediately jumps from rock to rock, trying not to fall inside as the priest tries to attack it but misses. This, however, gives Hyakkimaru an opening, and he immediately jumps in, stabbing the demon, but the demon pushes him away and bites his real leg deep, drawing blood. Thankfully, the priest is able to save Hyakkimaru, pulling him out of the crater as he screams in agony because his leg has been completely chomped off. The old priest saved him and carries him over back to the old temple, where Dororo comes up to them running, as he explains how Hyakkimaru wasn't strong enough and was still healing from his previous wounds, and that's why he ended up getting his foot chopped off. They quickly brings him in and start washing the wound when Mio comes back from her work, and is horrified to see Hyakkimaru in such a bad condition and quickly starts helping them wash his wounds. Later in the evening, Hyakkimaru remembers the fight with the weird bug monster, trying to think of a way to defeat him, and tired from waiting so long and eager to give Mio this house as a gift, decides to try and stand up with the help of a sword, but fails miserably and falls over. Mio comes running up to him and lays him down once again, telling him that he shouldn't move from his place while he is still sick. She starts talking to him and asks him to say something from his mouth, as she has never really heard his voice. Hyakkimaru, however, doesn't really know how to talk at all and simply points to his ears, telling her that his own voice is too loud for him and he is scared of it. Mio laughs at him and tells him that he will learn to live with it soon enough, before she decides to sing a song for him, as he really likes it. Hyakkimaru simply listens to her in awe, while Dororo and the old priest look from afar, still finding it hard to believe that Hyakkimaru really likes someone's voice. She tells Hyakkimaru that she sings this song usually when she is sad, but ever since he came here, she has started singing it when she is happy as well. She then asks Hyakkimaru whether he thinks her soul is corrupt because she's working for both the sides in the war, but Hyakkimaru can only see a pure soul in her, and holds her head in her hands to let her know. That evening, she leaves for work again and tells Dororo that he should make sure that Hyakkimaru doesn't leave the house and shouldn't even think about going to fight that monster at any cost. Dororo goes back to Hyakkimaru and finds him busy carving a piece of wood to fashion a leg out of it, but he stops him and starts feeding him a bunch of food and making him drink water, because hydration is the #1 killer of humans after Hitler. The next morning, when Dororo wakes up, he finds Hyakkimaru practicing with his new wooden leg outside in the ground, while the kids look at him in awe. Mio again goes off to work and once again tells Dororo to restrain Hyakkimaru in the house itself. One of the boys tells Hyakkimaru that even they found a bunch of cool stuff and take him inside where they show him a bunch of rusty swords left behind of the battlefield after the war. The children claim that they took the swords just as a memento of what they went through, and they only have one collective goal in life, and that is to create a rice farm where they can grow and eat as much rice as possible. Well, they are Asian. What can you expect? At night, Hyakkimaru decides to sneak away and goes over to fight with the demon once again. He runs around the monster, attacking him from different angles, but it wasn't really working out, so he changes over to a very dangerous strategy and runs up to the demon, jumping around him before attacking it head-on. The demon quickly takes a bite of his other wooden leg, catching him once again, but Hyakkimaru reveals that he attached one of those swords that the kid showed him into his wooden leg and removes it to stab the monster in the mouth before jumping high up in the sky and slashing the demon's head off, killing it immediately. Dororo also arrives at the scene and finds out that his chopped-off leg was reground after killing the demon, as they both walk back towards the temple to give everyone the good news. Suddenly, however, Hyakkimaru stops and points at the direction of the temple, where a bunch of smoke is rising up. They immediately run up the steps and are horrified to see samurais killing all of the children and burning the entire temple. Dororo walks up and is mortified to see Mio and all of the kids dead on the floor, while the commander of the troops looks at him and asks him whether he was one of them. Dororo has absolutely no idea what's happening and tries to run up to Mio to see whether she is fine, but is captured by the commander, who picks him up and throws him on the ground. He then walks up to him and raises his spear to kill him, when his entire arm is chopped off. Our boy Hyakkimaru arrives, still not understanding what's happened here, as he can't see anything, but senses that something is wrong. Dororo runs up to Mio, trying to save her life, while Hyakkimaru is surrounded by the soldiers. He stays there looking at Dororo, not understanding what's happened, when he hears the dying voice of Mio, singing the song that he loves so dearly. This sends him over the edge as he realizes that she is dead, and his cries rise above all other sounds nearby as he completely loses control and goes berserk. He stabs the first enemy in the neck, killing him immediately, before dodging the strike of the other guy and killing him as well. He then moves ahead and kills 3 more guys in quick succession, screaming in agony as the only voice that could soothe him was dead, and he can never be soothed again. He goes over to the other soldier and chops him up like a bowl of salad, killing the final soldier as well ruthlessly, before moving towards the one-handed commander, who tries to back off and begs for mercy, telling him that the girl was a spy, as she was working in both of the army camps. But Hyakkimaru doesn't give a shit as he moves towards him, ready for the kill, when Dororo runs up to him and stops him with all his might, telling him not to become a monster and control himself. Hyakkimaru pushes him off, but Dororo grabs him again, while the commander quickly runs away. Dororo shows him a bag of rice that Mio got and wanted to sow it in the ground and create fields of rice. He tells him that she never lost for humanity or hope even in such dire circumstances, and neither should he. This breaks Hyakkimaru down, who drops to his knees and hugs the love of his life before bidding her goodbye as the temple around him collapses to dust. The next day, they decide to continue their journey and start following the road again, trying to ward off the memories of this event. Hyakkimaru and Dororo move on their way once again, walking through a desolate forest while Dororo looks at a quiet Hyakkimaru, who is still holding the bag of rice that Mio got, still plagued with the memories of a very open wound. Dororo tries to talk to him, but as usual, he is extremely silent, simply walking ahead. Dororo even tries to tickle him to try and make him laugh, but Hyakkimaru is completely unmoving. Suddenly, they hear the voice of a man coming from nearby, and at first Dororo thinks that the man is making fun of him, so he starts throwing rocks everywhere, when he suddenly moves ahead and finds the man encapsulated in a web amongst the trees. Hyakkimaru spots the spider monster and immediately jumps up on the trees and slashes the webs to free the man, just before the monster decides to attack him. He dodges out of the way and slashes at the monster, injuring it before the monster pushes him away and uses its webs to tie him to a tree before running away. They try to pursue the demon, but lose it in the woods before coming to the edge of a cliff. Dororo, however, ends up locating a village in the distance and seems to be happy, as now they can go there and maybe find some food. They enter the village only to find it very well defended with a bunch of guards placed everywhere. Dororo asks what's the reason for such extreme measures, and one of the guards replies that there has been kidnappings during the night in the village, and they are just trying to make sure that none of the people are harmed. They both go near a temple staircase, and Dororo tells him that the kidnapper must be the spider monster, and if they are able to kill it, they will get rewarded for sure. The monster, on the other hand, transforms into a pale woman dressed all in white as she lays down in a bed of flowers, totally powerless and weak, because she wasn't able to suck the life force out of any humans that night. I swear I have seen this exact same setting in one of the culture animated videos that I watch at night while wonking my willy. Anyways, the next morning, a well-meaning man ends up finding the demon lying unconscious and immediately goes over to check on her. She wakes up and seems to be in shock to be so close to a human in daylight, but he immediately apologizes for scaring her and tells her to accompany him to his house as she looks very frail and tired. The demon is too weak to do anything, so she decides to bide her time as the man takes her to his house and sets her up against the wall. The man quickly puts the breakfast that he made for himself in a bowl and hands it over to the demon, telling her to eat it. She seems to be like an uncultured American who doesn't know how to use chopsticks and starts eating with her hands instead. The Indians are officially proud of you. Even though she had her reservations, she ends up finding the dish really tasty and eats it all, before asking the kind man whether he has had anything to eat. The man lies to her and replies that he has had his fill before leaving for work. While going to work, he ends up meeting Hyakkimaru and Dororo, who are also roaming around the village gathering information when they notice a huge crowd assembled near a notice board. They end up finding out that an official bounty has been placed on whoever finds the kidnapper in the area, which gives Dororo another boost of energy, as he proudly claims that they will definitely claim the bounty after defeating the monster, who has been kidnapping these people. After that, both Hyakkimaru and Dororo move over to the staircase by the temple once again, where they eat whatever wild berries they can forage, while waiting for night to fall so that they can find the demon and kill it, claiming the bounty. The kind man returns to his place as well, where he finds the woman where he left her waiting for him. He goes over to her and looks at her pale face before telling her that she is looking weaker and decides to get her some more food, but notices a cockroach in her bowl. Instead of killing, however, he goes over to the open window and leaves it outside, claiming that every single life form deserves the chance to live and they should not take someone's life no matter what. The woman finds this man very perplexing, but simply eats the food that he gives her without a second word. Late at night, the woman wakes up and finds the kind man sleeping. She moves over to him and is about to suck his life force, when suddenly she remembers his kind gesture and decides to simply eat the rest of the food and goes back to sleep. The next morning, Hyakkimaru and Dororo seem to be exhausted as they walked the village all night but didn't find any monsters. They again see a massive crowd assembled in the same area with a notice board and find out that the reward for finding the monster has been increased again because even the last night, a man was kidnapped. This surprises Dororo as they were walking through the village the entire night and didn't see a single demon, so it's impossible that this is the work of a demon. He looks sadly at Hyakkimaru as both of them are very hungry from not eating properly from the past 2 days. They decide to go back to the temple staircase and wait for the night once more, and if they can't find the monster, they will leave in the morning. The kind man, on the other hand, goes back to his home at night and finds the woman in a very bad condition, as she seems to be extremely frail. He checks her fever before telling her that there is no doctor in this village and they will have to get her out of here before her condition worsens. This is easier said than done, however, as the Lord residing over this area doesn't let any villager leave the village whatsoever, as he wants to make them work as much as possible to increase the revenue. The man, however, tells her that he knows a secret passageway, and that he will take her there as soon as possible. He takes the demon woman and starts running towards the rocky areas of the village as there are no guards stationed there because there is no visible path to escape. However, he has found one that no one knows about and can use it whenever he wants. Surprisingly, however, the man ends up running into Dororo and Hyakkimaru once again, as they were on their nightly patrol to find the demon. The woman immediately recognizes Hyakkimaru as the man who attacked her in the village, which confirms that she is indeed the spider monster, as Dororo tells Hyakkimaru to capture her, as she is the kidnapper, so that they can claim the reward. Dororo tells the kind man to move out of the way, otherwise she will kidnap him and suck him dry, as she's a monster. The man, however, surprisingly simply moves in front of her, shielding her from any harm, and tells them that she has done nothing wrong, as he is the one who is making people disappear from this village. All of them seem to be in shock, but he replies that he has been helping the villagers escape through this secret passageway for some time now, as the working condition in this village is extremely bad, and the Lord forces them all to work in very dangerous terrain with little to no money. That is the reason he helps them escape from the village, so that they can lead a safe and happy life. Suddenly, however, a bunch of guards arrive at their location after hearing the loud voices, and seem to be ready to catch both the man and the woman. Two of the guards run towards them to catch the man, but the demon immediately becomes Spider-Man and pulls them in before sucking their life force, and seems to have gotten some strength back. Hyakkimaru immediately draws out his sword and runs towards her, but she simply throws her white cloth at him and traps him with a bunch of webs before running away. Dororo helps him get out of the webs, and he immediately runs after them, followed by Dororo, as the guards start sounding their whistles to call for backup. The demon carries the man with her over the cliff with the help of her webs, where the man asks her whether she kills the humans she preys upon. Surprisingly, however, she replies that humans are a precious source of energy for her, so she only sucks a little bit of their life force, which won't really affect them, and then leaves them alone so that they can heal again quickly. Dororo and Hyakkimaru arrive below the cliff and look around to find a bunch of guards also hot on the trail of the demon, so they take a different path. However, the guards arrive first and start shooting arrows at the man and the demon. 2 arrows hit the man as he falls over on the ground bleeding. This enrages the demon as she quickly uses her webs to seal the wound and stop the bleeding before blocking the other arrows and capturing a bunch of the guards and transforming into a real monster. She grabs the rest of the guards and tries to pull them towards her as well, but Hyakkimaru stops her by cutting off her webs and attacks her, chopping off one of her arms. She kicks Hyakkimaru away, injuring him as he lays there on the ground before going back to the injured man as she checks on him, telling him to stay alive as she will carry him to the next village to find a doctor. Hyakkimaru gets back up and points his sword at her, ready to fight, when she turns around, realizing that this will be a fight to the death. But the man tells her not to take any lives, and Hyakkimaru spots that her soul starts reverting back into a much more whiter color instead of a red one, as she simply goes back to the man, making sure he's okay. Both Hyakkimaru and Dororo end up letting them leave the village as they realize that the demon can simply suck a little life out of the man for her energy, and they can live together forever. The next morning, they get the road again as this village was a total bust, and they didn't earn anything from here. A couple days pass by, and both Hyakkimaru and Dororo look for some village that they can rest, but while traveling through some rocky terrain with a bunch of hydrothermal vents around, Dororo asks Hyakkimaru whether he couldn't smell. It turns out that Hyakkimaru still hasn't gotten his nose back, as he doesn't really care about the bad smell surrounding them because of all the chemicals and gases coming out of the earth. While walking, however, they suddenly see a bunch of men clad in while walking with a girl, which looks like a wedding procession. They look at it for a bit, and are about to move forward when suddenly a boy emerges from the mountains looking like Inosuke and aims his bow before shooting an arrow at the procession, which falls behind them, as his aim is shit. The boy quickly knocks another arrow, but Dororo stops him, yelling at him for endangering the lives of people for no reason. But the boy tries to push him away and shoot the arrow, but is stopped once again by Dororo. The boy tells him that they are going to marry the bride to a monster, and he isn't going to let that happen. Dororo, however, tells him to chill out as they are expert demon hunters and will kill the monster for him. He takes them to the edge of a cliff, showing them a village which is enveloped by a huge dark cloud above it. The boy tells them that the cloud is the monster itself, who is very ancient and has been troubling the nearby villages for several centuries now. According to him, if the cloud arrives at any village, the village has to offer a bride to it, and only then it leaves them alone, otherwise it will devour every single person inside of the village. The boy introduces himself as Saru tells them that he considers the woman who is dressed as the bride as his sister, and he can't let her be eaten by the monster, no matter what. Dororo looks at him and tells him not to worry, as they will take care of it, but also informs him that their services are not free, and that you will have to pay up. The boy tells them that it's not a problem and hands him a bunch of bugs alongside his shiny yellow thing. Dororo realizes that this boy is a gone case and has nothing that he can pay them with, but realizes suddenly that the shiny yellow thing was a small bit of gold. He looks at the boy and asks him where he found this, and he replies that he found it in a river nearby and has got lots of it, which they can take if they can defeat the monster. Dororo is delighted and tells him that they will take the job. They go up the hill and find the woman sitting on a rock wearing a white dress, while 2 guards are sitting nearby preventing her from escaping even though she is already bound with a rope. Both Dororo and Saru go behind the rock and knock the guards out with some clubs, before Saru runs up to his sister and quickly cuts her free of her ropes before telling her that he is here to save her. However, she tells him to run away as she isn't going to leave this place because if she does, the monster will devour the entire village. Dororo, however, introduces himself and tells her that they won't let that happen and kill the demon themselves. The girl seems to be pretty unconvinced as she asks them how exactly are they going to kill a cloud, but Dororo replies that if it eats people, it must have a mouth and a belly, and Hyakkimaru will slash it to bits, killing the demon. Suddenly, Hyakkimaru draws out his swords and Saru comments that the monster is coming. Immediately, a dark cloud surrounds them and sucks up the 2 men that were just coming back to consciousness. And as Dororo watches in horror, the men fall from the sky a short while later, chopped to pieces. Dororo shouts at Hyakkimaru to attack the monster, but he doesn't respond as he has no idea where the monster is. To him, the entire cloud looks red and he can't see anything inside of it, having no idea where the hell the monster is. This was the first time Hyakkimaru was completely devoid of any senses, and was totally a sitting duck, having no idea what to do. While Hyakkimaru was totally confused, the demon tries to attack Saru, but at the very last moment, his sister ends up jumping in the middle, pushing him aside and sacrificing herself for his safety. The demon immediately devours her and flies away, leaving nothing but just her empty white clothes as the black cloud dissipates. Saru drops down on his knees, looking at the piece of clothing left behind as the only memory of his sister, as he folds it carefully and takes it back to the den where he lives. Hyakkimaru and Dororo follow him as Dororo goes inside the den and is surprised to see it full of odd things such as bow and arrows, sticks, and stones, etc. Saru explains that his parents died when he was very young. Ever since, he has been living here alone without anyone's help as he hunts himself, cooks himself, and defends himself. The one thing that he hates about this world is the humans, as they would come to his mountains and burn his house, telling him to leave the place as they are going to make better villages here. The young boys would even throw stones at him, as if he was some sort of an animal, chasing him away, but one day he got hurt while passing through the mountains and was sitting on the ground when a young woman walked up to him, asking him if he was okay. Saru was obviously wary of humans, so he immediately took a rock to defend himself, but the woman calmly told him to relax as she sat down and dressed his wounds so he can walk again. Ever since that day, he started coming through the village just to watch her do daily tasks, as it reminded him of what having a mom feels like. He then looks around at Dororo and tells him that he will take revenge no matter what, either with or without him. Dororo obviously tells him that they will help, but goes out to see that Hyakkimaru is brooding like an emo girl, sitting behind a rock and throwing stones at the nearby boulders. Dororo explains to him that Hyakkimaru is sad and confused, as this is the first time he is against a demon where he can't rely on his vision. Saru and Dororo, however, suddenly spot the cloud in the distance hovering over the village again. Dororo asks Saru why the cloud is still there, as according to the legend it should go away, but he replies that the demon must be angry because they tried to steal its bride. Dororo looks at Saru and tells him that if they can bring the monster out of the cloud into the open sunlight, they have a chance of defeating it, and decide to act on that plan the next day before turning into sleep. Hyakkimaru, however, couldn't sleep and kept brooding over his failure, even though there is nothing that he could have done. As the next morning rolls up, Dororo's plan is in play. He disguises himself in the white bridal dress and sits on the same rock waiting for the demon to arrive. A little while later, the demon arrives and starts circling him, eager to take a bite, when Dororo runs away and starts taunting it. The demon chases after him, but he is able to dodge the attack, and before the demon could attack again, he simply jumps inside of a small hole, saving himself before coming out of a different end and making the demon chase after him once again. While running away, however, his robe gets stuck in some rocks and he falls over while the demon was hot on his chase. Dororo immediately gets out of his robes and ducks into a hole, saving himself by a hair's margin. After that, the second part of their plan starts as Saru, who was watching all this from the cliff above, takes out his bow and uses a flaming arrow to shoot near the hydrothermal vents, where the demon was roaming to try and find Dororo. As soon as the arrow touches the ground, a huge explosion takes place, dousing everything in fire, while Dororo runs up the hill to witness the plan in action. The demon is completely on fire and even the clouds start disappearing. They seem to be very happy that their plan was working when suddenly, the demon coiled itself tightly, suffocating the fire before releasing a bunch of ash from its body, creating a huge cloud once again. The demon then rises up once more and was about to attack Dororo and Saru, who were completely in the open, when suddenly an arrow hits the demon. It turns around to see Hyakkimaru standing below, who starts shooting a bunch of arrows at it. Even though the measly arrows were having no effect on the demon, Dororo realizes that Hyakkimaru is using the sound of the arrows hitting the demon to gauge where it is right now, and as soon as he realizes that the demon is close by, he immediately takes out his swords and jumps in the air, slashing an eye of the demon, blinding it as it falls to the ground. The demon, however, gets up once again and slams him away before moving towards him to finish him off when Dororo decides to intervene and jumps from the cliff with a rope around his waist. He ties the other end of the rope to the demon's head and screams at Hyakkimaru to follow his voice as he is on the demon's head. The demon tries to fling him away, rushing through a bunch of rocks, and a piece of rock hits Dororo in the head, knocking him out cold. Hyakkimaru starts screaming for him, but the demon hits him away once again. He takes out both of his swords, still screaming when the demon attacks him from behind, but he is able to stop its attack with his sword as the demon starts hitting him with his tentacles around its mouth, before flinging him up in the air. The demon flies up as well, deciding to finish him off when Dororo returns to consciousness and screams at Hyakkimaru, telling him where the head of the demon is. Dororo dodges the demon's attack and stabs one of the remaining eyes, dissipating the cloud around them, but turns out the demon had two heads, so the other head rushes at him, but Hyakkimaru decides to jump inside of its mouth before slashing it from the inside, completely killing it. The demon gets destroyed into pieces, and they all fall into the water below. Saru immediately runs up to them, asking if they are okay, when he suddenly notices that his sister is also lying in the water. He immediately rushes up to her and holds her, thinking that she is dead, when suddenly she starts coughing and returns back to consciousness. Dororo and Hyaku both get up as well when Hyakkimaru's head starts aching, and suddenly his prosthetic nose falls off on the ground, and in its place a new nose grows up, and immediately he covers his nose because of the horrible smell around him which overwhelms him. As promised, Saru gives Dororo a bunch of the yellow stuff, but when he opens his hand he finds that it's only a bunch of bullshit and not actual gold. He asked about the gold piece Saru gave him earlier, but he replied that he doesn't really know about it, and he just calls it gold stuff. Dororo lets out a huge sigh, but decides to let it go. Even a woman gives him a beautiful flower as a thank you gift, before they part ways as our heroes start on their journey once again down the road, while Hyakkimaru keeps smelling the flower as he doesn't like any other smell around him. Since then, a couple of days have passed, but Hyakkimaru has not become bored with his new sense of smell. He continues to smell every single flower that is around him, and he even grabs Dororo's head to sniff it. He manages to free himself by pulling himself up, but then he trips and falls to the ground. As Hyakkimaru completes his turn, he gets back on his feet, but he is soon knocked back down by the fever that is making him so uncomfortable that his face turns bright red. Hyakkimaru doesn't waste any time and picks him up before setting off down the road, wandering around aimlessly in search of someone who can assist him. He asks a person walking by whether they can assist him, but the person just ignores him and continues walking away. Hyakkimaru continues on foot and eventually comes across a gardener who is resting beneath the protection of a tree. He asks the gardener for assistance as well, but the gardener tells him that if he wants the child to get better, he needs to get the child to a doctor as soon as possible. Hyakkimaru, on the other hand, is at a loss for what to do, so he does nothing more than sit beneath the tree's shade with Dororo in the hopes that the cool shade will cause Dororo's body temperature to decrease. Fortunately, a nun happens to be passing by at that very moment and inquires as to Hyakkimaru's well-being. She looks at Dororo and then leads him back to her temple, where she places him on a straw mat and begins applying a wet rag to his forehead in an effort to bring down his temperature. Dororo eventually comes to and immediately tries to get up, telling the nun that if he doesn't, Hyakkimaru will leave him alone and continue on without him if he doesn't. The nun, on the other hand, wards off his fears by explaining that Hyakkimaru is only going to get some more water and that he won't abandon Dororo in the meantime. He regains his composure and hopes that she is okay before she inquires as to the status of his parents, specifically whether they are still alive or have passed away. Dororo tells her that his dad and mom were the leader of a very well-known brigand group that had a lot of followers and were known to fight against the samurais. They used to have fun all night sitting around a campfire, talking about hunts and wars when one night a bunch of samurais attacked their camp at night. The brigand group was unprepared and a bunch of them were shot dead almost immediately, but they were able to raise an alarm and the fight broke out. It was a very deadly affair, but Dororo's father and his best friend were able to slice through almost all of the samurais and were victorious in this skirmish, deepening their friendship and bond. Several nights later, Dororo ends up asking his dad why he hates the samurais so much, and he replies that the samurais burn their fields, kill their men, and destroy their houses before taking their women and children as slaves, all in the name of war. And that's why he is going to take revenge for every family that was destroyed by a bloody samurai. His best friend ends up speaking, however, and tells him that he has already taken enough revenge, and according to him, they should join one of the lords as they will reward him very much. Dororo's mom speaks up, however, and tells the guy that he has lost his mind as it goes against their core belief and that they will never do it, because these lords are the one that start war and don't believe that these low-life farmers are even worth looking at. The guy tries talking sense to them, but Dororo's father becomes Will Smith and bitch slaps his best friend, telling him not to speak of it ever again. Some days later, they decide to begin an attack on a samurai camp, and they all seem to be in a very good position, and we're going to catch the samurais off guard. They begin their assault, but almost immediately the samurais were able to turn around and shoot them to bits, as they seemed to be ready for an assault like this and even knew what's the direction the assault would be coming from. Dororo's father immediately runs back and jumps on Dororo and his mom to protect them from oncoming arrows as a bunch of arrows hit him, injuring him. It turns out that the best friend ended up betraying the faction and told the samurais about the plan in exchange for a pardon and a high position. They surround the three brigands as Dororo's father shouts at his best friend for betraying his comrade, but as soon as he gets up, he is shot again by a bunch of arrows in the leg. The best friend tells him that the age of samurai has come and that he should use his brain more than his fists, slaps him in the face with his own weapon, and leaves them to die. Dororo's father and his mother keep moving forward, growing weaker and weaker as they don't have any food to eat. They become hungry to a point that they get forced to search for food on the dead soldiers after a bloody battle. One unfortunate day, they were passing by a village when they spotted a bunch of samurais burning a village and assaulting its inhabitants. This angers Dororo's father, but his mother ends up calming him down, telling him to leave it, but one of the samurai notices and recognizes him, ordering the others to attack. One of the guys attacks him, but he simply uses his naginata to shish kebab him before a bunch of other men attack him. He throws the first attacker on them, knocking them down before throwing a stray sword at two other attacking men, chopping their legs up. Another guy attacks and breaks his naginata, but he is able to kill him as well when suddenly, one of the soldiers uses his spear to pierce him through the back, mortally wounding him. He, however, turns around and grabs the man, pushing himself into the man, stabbing him with the same spear, killing him but dying in the process. Dororo screams for his dad as his mother tries to comfort him, but now that even her husband is dead, she starts becoming weaker and weaker. They walk through the fallen villages, war-torn lands, and barren soil together when one day, a stranger tells them that a bunch of samurai are distributing ration at the temple. His mother immediately takes him there and gets in line when she suddenly notices that the person in charge is none other than her husband's best friend. He notices her and walks towards her, taunting her, and asks where her husband was, smiling when she replies that he is dead. Dororo grabs a rock to throw at him, but his mom tells him not to do any such thing. Suddenly, the person distributing food shouts that the ration is low, and everyone starts pushing each other to get some food. His mom is able to go ahead and begs the man to give her some food, but the guy points out that she doesn't even have a bow with her. She simply puts out her hand, cupping it, and tells him to pour the food over it. He looks surprised as the food is boiling hot and doesn't know what to do, when suddenly the best friend walks up and tells him to give it in her hand only. He pours the boiling food in her hand, burning her hand completely, but she doesn't drop the food and simply walks over to the side and tells Dororo to eat it after making sure it's cold. A couple more days pass after that, and now her weakness is reaching an insane level as she stumbles through the red spider lilies before falling down from exhaustion. Dororo begs her to stay alive and promises that he will never ask her for food ever again, but she simply tells him that she loves him and closes her eyes into an eternal sleep. The poor nun starts crying after hearing his tragic story as Hyakkimaru brings her the water that she needed. 3 days pass after that, and finally Dororo is feeling better, and they set out on their journey once again. Hyakkimaru and Dororo arrive at their next town, which incidentally falls under the region that Hyakkimaru's father rules. He has no idea about it, however, and alongside Dororo, he goes around the town, watching plays about how Lord Daigo defeated a bunch of demons. There they end up spotting the old priest, and after the play was over, Dororo tells him what happened to Mio and the others. The priest seems to be sad, but when asked what he was doing her, he simply replies that the region around this area are suffering badly, but this area is the only place which is still expanding. People say that this is because of Lord Daigo, as he captured a bunch of demons in a shrine, which made Buddha give him his blessing, and that's why this area is so prosperous, but he wants to check it for himself. Dororo explains that they are just passing by and would like to see whether there are any demons around. Hyakkimaru overhears two men talking amongst themselves about after they have said their goodbyes and gone their separate ways. The conversation is about something related to demons. They approach them and ask them what they were talking about, to which one of the men replied that there is a wall dividing this region from the one that is adjacent to it. In spite of the fact that these two regions are currently engaged in hostilities against one another, the urban legend maintains that the wall was once used as a border. However, during the conflict, only a single section of the wall was maintained thanks to the efforts of the Trump Corporation. This section was referred to as the legendary Wall of Baman. However, it is now surrounded at all times by demons, and enemies from the kingdoms that are nearby are always stationed there. If anyone attempts to cross the wall, the enemies will kill them. Dororo and Hyakkimaru make the decision to pay the wall a visit, so they go into a huge field that has a single tall wall erected in the middle of it. They move closer to examine it, and when Dororo sneaks a peek around the corner, he sees a number of skeletons shot through with arrows and pinned to the wall. These were the individuals who made an attempt to scale the wall. According to the residents of this region, a large number of demons are being drawn to this location due to the presence of these dead bodies. when a young boy suddenly interrupts them and calls out, telling them to stay away because they might get shot by the enemy archers. Hyakkimaru touches the wall and tells Dororo that he can feel a very strong presence of a monster nearby, but he can't pinpoint it. Dororo proudly responds that they are here to defeat the demon that is contained within this wall, despite the fact that he tells them to rob the corpses elsewhere. This piques the boy's interest, and as a result, he offers to make them a hearty meal for supper. He tells them that he was separated from his family during the war because they ended up crossing the wall, but that he was caught before he could cross, and that ever since that time, he has been trying to find a way to cross the wall safely so they can reunite with his family. He tells them that the entire day, archers are posted up from the enemy's side and there is no way he could cross them. Dororo asks him why can't he cross at night, and he replies that there is no way anyone can cross this part of the land at night, as the entire area is overrun by a fox spirit who haunts this place. Dororo, however, reassures him that he needs not to worry, as Hyakkimaru will deal with a demon, and even though usually they charge money for such services, but because he has fed them, they will do it for free. The kid seems extremely overjoyed as he thanks them insistently. They wait for the evening and peek from around the wall, when suddenly they spot the archers leaving their positions and moving back inside of the forest as they are scared of the demons. Suddenly the environment changes and a green-colored spirit emerges from the area, swirling around and takes the shape of a fox. That's now enough, however, as suddenly a bunch of more fox spirits appear behind it and they start moving towards them. One of the spirits attacks Hyakkimaru, who draws out his sword and uses it to cut the spirit into two pieces. A bunch of other spirits also attack him, but he dodges their attacks and slashes all three of them, killing them immediately. He keeps chopping these spirits up, giving the young boy a hope to reunite with his family, when suddenly, the fox howls and a bunch of spirit energy starts accumulating around them. Looking at the sheer number of them, Hyakkimaru removes both of his hands and reveals the swords before cutting them to pieces as they charge at him. He, however, cannot keep up with their insane numbers and ends up getting bitch-slapped by one of them. Dororo realizes that Hyakkimaru is having troubles, so he immediately picks up a bunch of stones and starts throwing them at the spirits, distracting them. The young boy looks at the two people fighting all of the spirits, and he realizes that he has a clear path to run into the forest and cross the border, so he starts running away. Dororo notices him and tries to stop him, as it might be dangerous going alone, but his area is blocked by a spirit who is about to attack him, when suddenly Hyakkimaru arrives and cuts the spirit into small pieces once again. He tells Dororo to chase the boy, while he distracts the spirits, and Dororo thanks him before running away at the other end to try and find the boy. The spirits go up in the sky and form a huge nine-tailed fox, because why not? He keeps dodging the blows again and again, but the giant fox demon is a bit too fast and pins Hyakkimaru down, which is very kinky, to be honest. Dororo, on the other hand, infiltrates the enemy jungle, shouting the boy's name like a moron, and gets caught by the guards over there alongside the boy. Hyakkimaru is still pinned down by the monster. He uses his legs to throw it up before cutting one of its legs, engaging in a face-off once more. Suddenly, however, a bunch of arrows fly towards him, and the fox disappears. Hyakkimaru gets up and turns around to see his father, Daigo, and his troops are standing with their bows knocked and their arrows aiming at them. Hyakkimaru has no idea about who his dad is, but Daigo has come here with the intention to kill his own son, as they stand in a face-off, not knowing what's going to happen next.